Dear students in 11 Blue, how are you doing? I hope you're doing pretty well. This is Mr. Abu talking to you. This is like a flip lesson um, about a new section in the Unit 16, um, exploration and expansion. Uh, if you remember, in the last sessions, we just covered Voyages of Discovery, Section 1, and we also passed by Conquest and Colonies, Section 2, and this is the third section we're going to cover. We're going to take part of that lesson, and we're going to complete it either this week or next week, inshallah, in the live sessions. So we're talking about new patterns of trade. So by pattern here, of course, we mean a way of trade, new way or new style of trade. So just to link what have been discussed with this lesson, we talked about the voyages and discoveries that were sent from Europe, from different countries like Spain, the United Kingdom, France, even Dutch also sent some explorers. And we mentioned their motives that they had three main drive, which are gold, God, and glory. And the fourth one was curiosity, which is important also. Um, we talked about why they explored these three reasons or three reasons, and then we talked about examples of those who tried to explore, like the Gama, Pedro Cabral, and other explorers from different countries. And we mentioned like main terms like circumnavigate, which is to go around the world. We mentioned that some of them like reached Canada, some reached Brazil, some reached India, and some even only just touched the tip of the South Africa, as we mentioned before. Then we talk about conquest and colonies. We said after exploring these places, they started to invade such places or settle down there. And we mentioned that some of them found the places were not ready enough to go there, so they just kept their control far away. Today we're talking about new patterns of trade um, between the Europeans and the Americas, especially. So let's check here the main idea. He says here that the creation of colonies in the Americas and elsewhere led to the exchange of new type of goods. Again, so the establishment or creation of colonies, okay, we mentioned that a colony is a place where you settle down by force and you start to control it or govern it. So the creation of colonies in the Americas and elsewhere in any other places led to the exchange of new types of goods. So people in America, for example, um, saw other goods that the Europeans brought from Europe, and vice versa. The Europeans saw new goods they never seen before in their countries, so they took these goods back to their countries. So it helped in the exchange of the new types of goods. We're gonna just know them, different kinds of foods and so on, even animals, the establishment of new patterns of trade, okay, new ways of trade, and new economic system in Europe. We're gonna like discuss such of these systems. So by the end of the lesson, either next session or next week, we need to answer these questions clearly. For example, how did exploration result in a new exchange of plants and animals, as I mentioned earlier? What was mercantilism? This is an expression we need to know. And how did it push the drive to establish the colonies? Again, what was mercantilism? Defining this term, and how did it pushed the drive to establish colonies there. So why mercantilism important to the degree that it was a motive for the Europeans to establish colonies? Finally, we have another question, which is how did global like international trade, lead to the rise of capitalism? Another term here we need to know in Europe. So let's go forward. So we mentioned that the voyages that were launched on a large scale just caused this kind of contact between the Europe and the Americas. We mentioned also that, excuse me, there was also another type of trade. So as we see here, there was interaction with the Native Americans that led to sweeping cultural changes. We have this kind also of cultural changes. People started to know about each other's customs and traditions and so on. Contact between two groups, like the Americans and Europeans, led to the widespread exchange, like wide or great or large exchange of plants, animals, and diseases. Even we're gonna discuss this in details later. All of this kind of exchange was called what? Was called the Columbian exchange. So if we are asked what is the Columbian exchange, we mentioned that this kind of widespread exchange in plants, animals, and even diseases between the Europeans and the Americans. Okay, we talk about the exchange of goods. We mentioned like plants and animals. So plants and animals developed in a very different ways in hemispheres, like between the two places, Europeans and Americas, like the hemispheres of the Earth, the two parts of Earth, for may say. We mentioned that the Europeans had no potatoes, no corn, no sweet potatoes, no turkeys. So these stuff here were very, very new to the Europeans. They never saw them before. On the other hand, we have the American people. They had no coffee, no oranges, no rice, wheat, sheep, or cattle. So both sides like had new stuff for them they never seen before. So then we start to talk about sharing discoveries, like exchange even in the discovery itself. So we mentioned here that arrival of the Europeans in the Americas changed all the beliefs and so on. Previously unknown food taken back to Europe. So when the Europeans went to the Americans and they had unknown food for them, they started to take back when they went back to Europe. And familiar food brought to Americans by the colonists. So they started to have this kind of new food and so on. So we talk about the introduction of beasts of burden, great burden to the American was a significant development from the Columbian exchange. We mentioned also that the introduction of the horse, the animal, provided people in the Americans with new source of labor and transportation. Labor means work, transportation we know it, like moving from one place to another, right? So this kind of exchange, guys, like made great change in many fields in our life, or let's say in their lives. So plants, animals, and great stuff. So let's take another one. This is an example of the food that was like exchanged. For example, in the animals from the Americans to Europe, we have, for example, Genoa pigs, we have llamas, we have turkeys, we have beans, for example, corn, potatoes, and this stuff. The Americans brought from Europe some stuff, but it wasn't only from Europe, but it was from Africa and Asia. We had animals like the cattle, chicken, donkeys, goats, horses, and house cats, and every stuff like this pigs, rabbits, sheep, and so on. For plants, the Europeans produced or introduced for the Americans the bananas, black pepper, garlic, and onions, and such stuff, lettuce, and other stuff. But it wasn't only from from Europe, from Africa and Asia. It wasn't only animals and plants, but also they brought diseases like cholera, influenza, malaria, measles, and smallpox. So all these were diseases that weren't in the Americas, but when the Europeans came to Americans, they brought with them these diseases. Let's talk about this slide here, and then we can continue next sessions. We end with this slide. We want to talk about the effects of the Columbian Exchange. What happened after the Columbian Exchange? Now we have different foods, as we mentioned. We had exchange of food, animals, and aromatic impact that we just mentioned in society. Over time, crops became native to the Americas, became established in the diet to the Europeans. So the Europeans started to imitate what was eaten in the Americas because they settled there. Food provided substantial nutrition, like basic nutrition, helped people live longer because this is now more healthy. You know, then we talk about economics and gastronomics. We talk about the taxes, that cattle ranching. We mentioned that the Brazilian coffee growing not possible without Colombian exchange because it wasn't known in the Americas, but the Brazilians started to grow it and be like skillful growing it. Cows also coffees were native to the old world. Now we talk about also traditional cuisines that changed because of the Colombian exchange, like plates or dishes. The Italian food is one example of this. It was um, clear of tomatoes. So until the contact with America, the Europeans had never tried tomatoes. Most Europeans threw out tomatoes poisonous, thought that the tomatoes poisonous. But by the late of 16th 100, tomatoes had begun to be included in the Italian books. So we're talking about Columbian exchange, changing in plants, animals, and even diseases, and this made this kind of um, great change in the society there, either the Europeans or the Americans. We'll stop here for today. We'll complete next sessions. Thank you so much. See you next time. Bye.